There is no standard by which Israel committed a genocide in Gaza, just on a factual level.
I understand the tendency for people to assert that.
Why?
On the basis of the images and the proportionality.
Ugly
as it
shit
relates
doesn't
to
mean genocide.
No. And by the way, I agree with you.
And international and proportionality doesn't mean that if you kill my child and I then kill 7 criminals, that I've been disproportionate.
So Gavin Newsom, the Democrat governor of California, recently had Ben Shapiro on his podcast in a transparent effort to endear himself to Jews and to the pro-Israel community. And it didn't go exactly as he expected. You got to watch this clip. And then I've got a lot to say about it, about what's actually going on in this whole interview and what Gavin Newsom is trying to do. But take a look at this.
Have become a sort of de rigueur requirement for Democrats who are running for office to now suggest, for example, Scott Wiener just did this. He's running for Congress, that Israel committed a genocide in Gaza. That is, forget about anti-Semitism and discussions of it, because I think that those have become really loose and people don't have a consistent definition of anti-Semitism. Let's just talk about what's true.
That's true. I think it's true about the definition. I mean, we, as you know, have been struggling with that in California as it relates to a lot of laws and legislation. Of course,
anti-Semitism is a fundamentally different cat than, for example, racism. It's basically a conspiracy theory about Jewish power in the world. But
and it makes me sick to my stomach, and I say that clearly. And no, but not just of course. I mean, we've tried to lead in terms of our response, and we've called out and called balls and strikes in terms of the outrageous things that have happened.
So I would, in my own framework of anti-Semitism, I think that saying overtly false things about the Jewish state is a form of anti-Semitism, but I don't think that that is really important as much as it is it true or not? So Democrats have now been dragged into this conversation, some dragged, some run with, flags waving, into the conversation
this notion of genocide.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look,
Israel did not commit a genocide in Gaza. There is no standard by which Israel committed a genocide in Gaza, just on a factual level.
Just as a legal and factual level.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your opinion of this?
My opinion is I understand the tendency for people to make that, to assert that.
Why?
On the basis of the images and the proportionality.
Ugly
as it relates
doesn't mean genocide.
No. And by the way, I agree with you.
And international proportionality doesn't mean that if you kill my child and I then kill 7 criminals, that I've been disproportionate.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think but I understand that tendency on the basis of trying to reconcile the proportionate nature of how the war was ultimately conducted and the devastation.
I have a question. Why do you feel the need to create a permission structure for that sort of stuff? I mean, meaning it's not true.
Yeah.
Why not just say it's not true?
Yeah, look, I don't know the definition, or I don't know the legal threshold. That's not my opinion, so I don't share that opinion as it relates to genocide. I do not agree with that notion. But you do understand that if you accuse Israel of committing a genocide, that now puts Israel in the position of it should be a pariah state, because states that commit genocide should be pariah states. Yeah. So granting legitimacy to that position inherently, I'm not granting legitimacy. I'm just saying the devastation in Gaza, at the human level. You've got 4 kids.
Of course it's terrible.
No, but I think it's also important to absorb that a little bit more, just as it was sick and we were clear in our condemnation, these people like me, as it relates to what Hamas did in that act of barbarism and terrorism.
Yeah, but there's a difference between deliberate terrorism and wartime collateral damage, of course. And if we refuse to acknowledge that reality, then we end up equating
collateral damage. I have stronger opinions. It wasn't just collateral.
Really? You think that Israel is targeting civilians?
I think some of the double tapping issues. I have a lot of issues with how Bibi ultimately conducted the war. I personally do, and I have a lot of issues that are also painted on the basis of the conversation I had with him a few weeks later after October 7th. The way he talked about the Palestinians, I kept talking about Hamas. He kept talking about the Palestinians. I kept coming back to Hamas, and then ultimately how the war was conducted. Not saying it was a genocide. I'm not. But I have issues.
What is the thing that he? Because right now, for example,
but the genocide issues.
Where are the members of the Democratic Party protesting and wearing pins for the protesters in Iran who are getting mowed down maybe by the tens of thousands this week.
Well, I know where I am. I put out a pretty clear statement this week, and
I'd like to see more Democrats.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And by the way, I also thought I thought it was the right thing to do, that strike, and I thought it was unbelievably effective and efficient, and had no problem saying that during the strike. Didn't wait for the outcome. So I marched to a beat of a little bit of a different drum, a little bit more nuance here. But there is, there's no, everything's so black and white. There's nuance here.
Now, first let's deal with this issue of proportionality and genocide that Gavin Newsom is saying. Like, he was talking about the proportionality, and Ben was correctly saying, well, this is collateral damage in warfare. So let me just clear this up. And let's go to the Geneva Conventions. Okay, so in the Geneva Convention, in Article 51 of the 1949 Geneva Convention, we read as following. So this is all about protection of civilians, protection of civilian population, and indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. Those are not directed at a military objective. And then down here, it says an attack would be considered indiscriminate, which may be expected to cause incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, damage to civilian objects, or a combination thereof, which would be excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated. That is the principle of proportionality in warfare. That's the clause when people say that a military action was disproportionate. From a legal perspective, they're referring to that passage in Article 51 of the 1949 Geneva Convention. So, for example, if there's a rocket launcher on the roof of a home that is aimed at Israel, let's say, and the home then becomes a legitimate military target. So an airstrike on that home is legitimate and is proportional. It's proportional regardless of how many casualties there are. The term proportional in warfare means that it is proportional because it serves the legitimate military advantage of destroying the rocket launching capabilities of that site. Should an airstrike to destroy that rocket launcher be a massive airstrike that also takes out a whole bunch of houses around that house, destroys numerous other houses, and kills lots of people that aren't even anywhere near the house that has the rocket launcher on it, serving no military advantage by their destruction, that response would be deemed, would not be considered a proportional response. That's the principle of proportionality in warfare. Gavin Newsom has no idea what he is talking about. And, the law of proportionality doesn't mean that if you kill 100 people, then if we kill more than 100 people, it was not proportional. Proportionality in warfare, again, just to sum up this point, proportionality in warfare legally is defined as actions that are taken that are proportional to the military goal of the action taken. Anything beyond the military goal would be considered, anything more than that, and would be considered excessive and therefore not proportional. Every single action that Israel has taken in the Gaza Strip has been proportional to its military goals. Now, if that means that there's hundreds of miles of tunnels underneath every single building and they have to get through these buildings and destroy them, or the fact that virtually every residential building in Gaza stored weapons in it and had rocket launchers in it. Okay, and this is something that is well known. I've heard it personally from numerous soldiers who fought in Gaza when they were doing their house-to-house searches. There's weapons everywhere. The entire Gaza was militarized. So when Israel is taking out the terrorist infrastructure and they have to visit all this destruction on Gaza, never mind the fact that Israel always dropped leaflets and made sure that there would be minimal civilian casualties, and many experts made it very clear that Israel did more than any other army in history to minimize civilian casualties. And the idea that Israel committed a genocide is absurd. The statistic that really gives the greatest lie to the whole thing is simply the fact that the population of Gaza has grown since October 7th. It has grown. Okay, this is a fact. Now, let's talk about this Gavin Newsom, Ben Shapiro conversation, because this is what's really interesting. Why did this conversation take place? Gavin Newsom is this left-wing Democrat governor of California. Okay, he's got this podcast. Why does he have Ben Shapiro on recently? Well, here's what's going on. See, Ben Shapiro recently caused a lot of controversy in the MAGA movement, in the right, in the conservative political space. when he showed up at America Fest, at Turning Point USA's America Fest. He was the first keynote speaker in Phoenix, Arizona. Now America Fest is the largest gathering of political conservative activists every single year. So Ben Shapiro gets up on stage and he calls out Candace Owens, and he calls out Tucker Carlson, and he calls out Megyn Kelly for what his speech focused on was that they violated the trust of their audiences, okay, by being disingenuous and dishonest in their approach to what they say. That was what his speech was basically about. And he got attacked. He got attacked by a lot of people in the MAGA movement during the rest of that conference and in the days after it for what they claimed was that he was calling for cancellation of voices like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and whatever. Now, Ben Shapiro never said he was calling for anyone's cancellation. And I don't want to weigh in on how much I liked or didn't like Ben Shapiro's speech and how he handled that. That's not the point. The point is this: Ben Shapiro has positioned himself within the political conservative space as being the opponent of the voices that have been anti-Semitic, as the opponent of Tucker Carlson and of Candace Owens and of their enablers and the people who support them and platform them. That's how Ben Shapiro has been positioned, okay? Now, I believe that what Gavin Newsom is doing right now and what he's going to continue to do, and we'll see him continue to do this in the campaign, I'm making a prediction right here, is this. If J.D. Vance, who is close friends with Tucker Carlson, Tucker Carlson's son, Buckley, works for J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has defended him, and he refuses to denounce him, and people are calling on him to do so. I'm not going to weigh in on whether I think he should or shouldn't do anything like that. But J.D. Vance has a close association with Tucker Carlson, who's really the leader of this anti-Semitic, anti-Israel wing of MAGA. So what's happening now, here's what Newsom is doing. Newsom brought Ben Shapiro on his show to have a conversation with Ben Shapiro where he, Gavin Newsom, could come off as moderate and somewhat pro-Israel. And they could tisk, tisk, tisk at all the anti-Semites. And what Gavin Newsom's going to do in the campaign is he's going to make all sorts of statements that sound pro-Israel and pro-Jewish and denouncing anti-Semitism. Simultaneously, the Democrats are going to demonize J.D. Vance for his friendship with Tucker Carlson, for his closeness to Tucker Carlson, and use the Jewish issue as a wedge to try to get Jews who have been politically conservative and pro-Israel people who've been in the politically conservative camp to back away from their support of J.D. Vance. And that is the political game that Gavin Newsom is playing. That is why he had Ben Shapiro on his show. So he's embracing Ben, and this way, he can seem like he talks to everybody. Here he's opening up dialogue with conservative and a more liberal and a Democrat having a conversation together. And he's sort of pro-Israel and he's pro-Jewish, and he denounces and anti-Semitism is terrible and Hamas is terrible. But he's doing this as a political device to try to take advantage of the positioning of Ben Shapiro against the Vance camp, the Tucker Carlson camp of MAGA, and that way he could defeat J.D. Vance in an election by painting J.D. as being part of this problematic wing. And the earlier he does it, by doing it now, which is way in advance of the presidential campaign, he builds up credibility for this position. This is what he is doing, and what you're going to see in the coming days is more, and in the coming years, as we lead up to the election. So long as J.D. Vance is the candidate that the Republicans are pushing, and right now it seems to be that he's the main guy that people are pushing, if they do that, you're going to see the Democrats, they're going to tack towards being pro-Israel in words and statements, towards being pro-Jewish and against anti-Semitism. This might cause a little bit of an outcry by the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party, which will only help this campaign because it'll make whoever is the candidate seem more moderate and more mainstream. They're going to try to position him kind of like a Bill Clinton. And I don't mean about all the sordid stuff Clinton did, but when Clinton ran for office, he was painted as a kind of moderate Democrat, not so liberal and a little bit more conservative. He was raised a Baptist, et cetera, et cetera. So Gavin Newsom is going to try to tack towards the middle, tack towards the Jewish community, tack towards Israel, as a way of pulling people away from the Republican Party with the stain of this association with Tucker Carlson and others in that camp, and make it seem that the Republicans are a little too friendly with anti-Semites. And this is going to present a bit of a challenge for the Republicans, for the MAGA movement. What do they do in order to counteract this? But that's what's actually happening in this interview. And of course, as you saw, it didn't go exactly as Newsom expected, because here he's playing all these games. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm against Hamas, I'm against all this. Meanwhile, he's giving legitimacy to the absurd claims that Israel committed genocide. So that's my take on that little snippet of interview between Gavin Newsom and Ben Shapiro. If you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe and share this stuff. But also make sure to check out everything that we're putting up at Israel 365's YouTube channel.